The Great Depression was a time of immense hardship for all Americans. The economic collapse of 1929 sent shockwaves through every corner of the nation, leaving no one untouched by its devastating impact. Yet, for African Americans, the Depression's blow landed with a cruel specificity. The already existing racial inequalities were exacerbated, making their struggle even more pronounced and severe. Already burdened by systemic racism and limited economic opportunities, Black Americans found themselves facing even greater adversity. The barriers they encountered were not just economic but deeply rooted in the social fabric of the time. Unemployment rates soared, reaching staggering levels for Black workers. Many who had jobs before the crash found themselves out of work, with little hope of finding new employment. Discrimination was rampant, often relegating them to the lowest-paying jobs that were often the first to disappear as the economy spiraled downwards. The few opportunities that did exist were marred by prejudice and exclusion. The agricultural sector, a mainstay for many Black workers in the South, was devastated by plummeting crop prices. This collapse left countless families without a stable source of income, pushing them further into poverty. Sharecropping, a system rife with exploitation, offered little respite. The promises of land and fair wages were often broken, leaving sharecroppers in a cycle of debt and dependency. In urban centers, Black communities faced eviction, hunger, and a profound sense of despair. The lack of adequate housing and resources made survival a daily struggle. The social safety net, still in its infancy, proved woefully inadequate in addressing the scale of need, particularly in Black communities. The limited assistance available often failed to reach those who needed it most. This period of profound economic distress exposed the deep racial fissures that ran through American society. The stark contrast between the experiences of Black and white Americans highlighted the pervasive inequalities. It laid bare the systemic inequalities that left African Americans disproportionately vulnerable to the vagaries of the market. The economic downturn was not just a financial crisis but a social one, revealing the deep-seated issues of racial injustice. As the nation grappled with the Depression's grip, the plight of Black Americans served as a stark reminder of the unfinished business of equality. Their resilience and determination in the face of such adversity became a testament to their enduring spirit and the ongoing fight for justice. Franklin Delano Roosevelt's election in 1932 brought with it a surge of hope and anticipation. The American people, weary from the Great Depression, looked to Roosevelt as a beacon of change and renewal. The New Deal, Roosevelt's ambitious plan to revitalize the American economy, promised relief, recovery, and reform. It aimed to provide immediate assistance to those in need, stimulate economic growth, and implement long-term structural changes to prevent future depressions. Yet the question of whether this New Deal would extend its benefits equally to all Americans, regardless of race, loomed large. Many wondered if the promises of the New Deal would reach the marginalized communities who had long been neglected. The answer, unfortunately, was often a resounding no. Despite the sweeping changes and numerous programs, racial discrimination remained a significant barrier. While the New Deal undoubtedly brought significant changes, racial discrimination remained deeply embedded in many of its programs. African Americans and other minorities often found themselves excluded from the full benefits of these initiatives. Southern Democrats wielding considerable power in Congress demanded concessions that often came at the expense of racial equality. Their influence shaped many of the New Deal policies, ensuring that segregation and discrimination persisted.
Programs like the Civilian Conservation Corps and the National Recovery Administration, while providing much-needed employment, often relegated Black workers to segregated camps and lower pay scales. These programs, though beneficial in some ways, perpetuated existing racial hierarchies. The Agricultural Adjustment Administration, designed to aid farmers, often benefited white landowners at the expense of Black sharecroppers who were driven further into poverty. This exacerbated the economic disparities between races.
The New Deal's shortcomings in addressing racial inequality revealed the complex political realities of the time. Despite its many successes, the New Deal failed to dismantle the systemic racism that plagued American society. Roosevelt, acutely aware of the need for Southern support to enact his legislative agenda, often chose political expediency over the pursuit of full racial equality. This compromise was seen as necessary to pass his broader economic reforms. This pragmatic approach, while perhaps understandable given the political climate, left a bitter legacy of unfulfilled promises for Black Americans. The New Deal, though transformative in many ways, ultimately fell short of delivering justice and equality for all. The year 1934 marked a significant turning point in American housing policy with the establishment of the Federal Housing Administration, commonly known as the FHA. This new agency was created as part of the New Deal, a series of programs and reforms introduced by President Franklin D. Roosevelt to combat the Great Depression. While seemingly a boon for homeowners, the FHA's policies would have long-lasting, detrimental effects on Black communities. The agency's guidelines favored new suburban developments and often excluded urban areas where many Black families lived. Redlining, a discriminatory practice that denied loans and mortgages to residents in predominantly Black neighborhoods, became entrenched, effectively segregating American cities and exacerbating racial disparities in wealth accumulation. These redlining maps, created by the FHA, marked Black neighborhoods as high risk, making it nearly impossible for residents to secure loans for home purchases or improvements. On the political front, however, a significant shift was underway. The economic hardships of the Great Depression and the New Deal's relief efforts began to reshape political allegiances. African Americans, traditionally aligned with the Republican Party since the days of Lincoln, began to gravitate towards Roosevelt's Democratic Party. This shift was driven by the tangible benefits of New Deal programs which, although limited and unequal, provided much-needed relief and opportunities. The tangible benefits of New Deal programs, however limited and unequal, resonated deeply within Black communities. Programs like the Civilian Conservation Corps and the Works Progress Administration offered employment and training, albeit often in segregated conditions. This nascent political realignment would have profound consequences for the future of civil rights. The growing support for the Democratic Party among African Americans laid the groundwork for future civil rights advancements and political activism. The landmark Wagner Act of 1935, while guaranteeing the right to unionize, often excluded industries dominated by Black workers, such as agriculture and domestic service. This exclusion was a significant oversight, as it left many Black laborers without the protections and benefits afforded to other workers. This exclusion further marginalized Black laborers and limited their ability to leverage collective bargaining for better wages and working conditions. The lack of union representation in these sectors meant that Black workers continued to face exploitation and economic instability. The Social Security Act, a cornerstone of the New Deal's social safety net, similarly excluded many Black workers, perpetuating a cycle of economic vulnerability. By excluding agricultural and domestic workers, the act failed to provide a safety net for a significant portion of the Black workforce, leaving them without retirement benefits and unemployment insurance. The 1936 presidential election witnessed the solidification of a new political landscape. Roosevelt, seeking re-election, found himself buoyed by a broad coalition of voters, including a growing number of African Americans. The New Deal, despite its flaws and shortcomings, had made a tangible difference in the lives of many Black Americans. The Democratic Party, once associated with the Confederacy and Jim Crow, began to be seen as a champion of the working class, regardless of race. This shift in political allegiance was not without its critics within the Black community. Some argued that Roosevelt's compromises on racial equality were too steep a price to pay, even for much-needed economic relief. However, the allure of a party seemingly more attuned to their needs, coupled with the Republican Party's perceived indifference to their plight, proved a powerful force. The Roosevelt coalition, with African Americans as a crucial component, would shape American politics for decades to come. It laid the groundwork for the civil rights movement's triumphs in the years to follow.
Executive Order 8802 was a significant milestone in the fight for civil rights. It was, the first federal action to promote equal opportunity and prohibit employment discrimination in the United States. This order, signed by President Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1941, laid the groundwork for future civil rights advancements. By banning discriminatory practices in defense industries, it opened doors for countless African Americans and other minorities, paving the way for a more inclusive workforce.
Despite the hardships of the Great Depression, African American culture flourished. The Harlem Renaissance, for example, was a beacon of creativity and resilience. Artists, musicians, and writers used their talents to express the struggles and hopes of their communities. This cultural renaissance provided a powerful voice for those who had long been marginalized. The New Deal brought significant progress, yet it didn't completely bridge the gap of racial inequality. African Americans gained more employment opportunities, but discrimination and segregation remained prevalent. The fight for equality was far from over, and the journey continued with new challenges and aspirations. The legacy of the New Deal and its impact on racial equality is still a topic of discussion today. It reminds us of the strides made and the work that remains. The conversation continues, urging us to reflect on our past and strive for a more inclusive future.